My goal is anyone who listens to my show knows I'm really passionate about trying to make the profession better for
Yeah.
the people working in it. I left public accounting because I didn't like how the big accounting firm I was working at operated.
Mm.
And I think there's a lot of things that we need to fix. And one of them is how we do education.
Hey, this is Christian Jones, and you're listening to the ProMarketer podcast. If you're in the tax compliance or maybe tax preparation, some of you tax resolution or accounting, whatever slice of our industry that you're a part of, the goal of the ProMarketer podcast is to bring tools, strategies, and different professionals to have conversations to help you guys build your practice like a pro. And today's guest is going to be a great one and is right in line with our goal is to bring authoritative, excellent content and subject matter experts to this podcast. We've got Blake Oliver with us today, who is the CEO of Earmark, which is an app, a platform that offers NASBA approved CPE for listening to accounting and tax podcasts. Blake is also a host of a top 25 business news podcast called The Accounting Podcast, which is on Apple, is probably on all of the podcast apps, wherever you go to get your podcasts. So we've got someone who speaks a lot, teaches a lot, and has a platform for teaching today. And so we're going to have a fun conversation with Blake. But Blake, let me just start out by saying thank you for joining us.
Hey, Christian, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. No, we're grateful for your time. Thanks for joining us as well. And as I told you before we started, softball question just to begin. Give us kind of an origin story. Like, we'll talk about Earmark as we go and what you guys do and your emphasis, but how did you get to the point of launching Earmark? And then we'll talk more about Earmark as a platform itself.
So it really came out of my show, the accounting podcast.
Mm.
I've been doing that for 5 or 6 years now. And a couple years ago, one of our listeners said, jokingly, I should get CPE for listening to this. I get so much value out of it. And that stuck with me. It stuck with my co-host David. And eventually, a couple years ago, I said, all right, I got to figure out how to do this. How do we help our listeners get CPE for listening to our show? And that is Earmark. So it's the simplest way that you can get CPE for listening to a podcast. There's a mobile app, there's a web app. You listen to an episode, you take a 5-question quiz, and you get your certificate.
Mm.
And for me as a CPA, I want to make it as easy as possible for myself to get CPE. So it's been great. We've had people reactivate their licenses because now it's not like a huge pain to get CPE. After a couple of years now, we've got like 1,300 courses on the app. And that's because it's not just my podcast anymore. It's
Right.
all sorts of accounting and tax podcasts. And I should say we now support YouTube as well. So if there's a YouTube video out there that somebody makes that's really educational for accountants, we can add CPE to that. And we've got webinars now. Yeah, it all came out of our listeners. And my goal is anyone who listens to my show knows I'm really passionate about trying to make the profession better for
Yeah.
the people working in it. I left public accounting because I didn't like how the big accounting firm I was working at operated.
Mm.
And I think there's a lot of things that we need to fix. And one of them is how we do education. So that's my little piece of trying to make the profession a better place.
Yeah. No, I am not a CPA, just to be clear, but you're one of a few CPAs that we've talked with recently that are innovating in the space and trying to improve it. So one, thank you. And the idea is obviously if you haven't heard of Earmark and you're hearing it for the first time, it's like, that's a great idea. Like just have your podcast be CPE, take a short quiz and can do that while driving. Don't have to be there at the set time as much as other CPA providers may require. And some of the other like engagement things where polls are happening mid webinar, that's great too. But that's an innovative, creative solution to a problem that I think a lot of people experience. So I love that. And you are, as you mentioned, you're a CPA and
Mhm.
you still have your license active and the accounting podcast and Earmark. But tell us about, because you said, let's talk about with Earmark specifically, trying to solve a problem in our space, in our industry, just even more macro, like trends in our space, trends you see within your community in Earmark, things you see happening. What are you seeing for our space or other areas? Maybe I can give you a softball of what else do you want to see change? What else do you think needs to change?
Specifically with education, I'm all about ending the 150-hour rule. That extra year of education to become a CPA, I think that is crap. I had to do it. I don't think anybody else should. And the data supports that it doesn't add value and it decreases the number of CPAs by anywhere from 14 to 25%, just that
Wow.
one rule alone.
Wow.
I'm in favor of going to something simpler like the CMA has, Certified Management Accountant. You just have to have a bachelor's and you pass the exam and you get, I think they do 3 years of work experience. I could be wrong. But we need to do something like that in accounting. Right now, it's just way too onerous. Specific accounting courses, you got to take these extra 30 hours that don't add value to most people. I'm passionate about that. And the good news is that we've seen AICPA just release their new draft pipeline report, which recommends moving from an hours based model to a competency based model. Long term, if the AICPA organization overall adopts these findings, then we will eventually move that way.
Mm.
Might take a while, but the other thing I'm passionate about is helping accountants have better work life balance, which is probably the bigger problem in the profession. The reason people leave is because they don't want to work 50, 60, 70 hours a week. And I actually think there's like a health place safety issue there. The WHO just released a report that said that your risk of stroke is like a third higher if you work 55 hours a week or more. And heart disease, it's like 17%, I think.
Wow.
And you see this, right? You just see how unhealthy accountants get during busy season. And I was one of them. And I traded during COVID, I traded my 2 hour commute in LA to a big office building for
Mm.
working at home. I'm here in my home office in Arizona. And now instead of driving, I work out for an hour and a half every day. And
Yes.
it's changed my life. It's so much better. And I'm more productive in the time that I do work. So I want to change those preconceived notions. And it's really the same thing, right? Where education has been all about how many hours you're sitting in a classroom, and that doesn't mean that you actually learned anything.
Right.
And in accounting firms that track billable hours and do timesheets, they're focused on these inputs. How many hours are you working? That doesn't relate to how you're actually doing, what you're actually accomplishing for your clients. So we just have to shift the mindset overall from inputs to outputs in our profession.
Mm-hmm.
And I think technology can help with that. I think just good business practices can help with that. So I talk a lot about that on my show and I teach webinars and I go out and I speak about that. And the good news is the more I do this, the more people I meet who are thinking the same way.
Yeah.
And so like it's like this problem that the bigger firms have retaining talent, I think is actually a great thing because it shows that people don't want to buy into that model anymore,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they'll have to change. And I think AI too is going to like really change things a lot because I've been playing around with it myself and we use it at Earmark and some of the stuff that I used to do, I can do now 8 times faster with AI. So if we're going to do that in accounting with accounting and tax and audit, you can't measure people on their inputs anymore because the ones who are using AI are going to be so much more productive
Yeah.
and you have no way of measuring that if they're just putting hours in a timesheet, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's where I see the profession moving away from that. That's what I'm trying to help do. And I think we'll get there eventually.
No, that is, I mean, maybe this is too strong of a word, but it does feel like potentially existential. Again, maybe too strong, but there just aren't a lot of people excited about getting into accounting because of the grind, because of what's required. Now, it can be a great career, especially if you land in a big firm, but even beyond that, just the idea of starting a small business in this space, being an independent firm owner, and having to figure all of this out on your own. What are some of the key things that you would tell to someone? Let's just pretend we're talking to startup,
Yeah.
someone big firm, whatever, starting their own deal. What are the things you would encourage them to consider as they start a new practice to set themselves up for a healthy, successful lifestyle?
The hard part is that you've got to forget everything they taught you at the big firm, most of what they taught you about how to run a business, because I would say those firms that are on that traditional partner model with the billable hours and charging for time, they're not businesses. They're just jobs for the
Right.
partners. If you want to have a firm where you don't actually have to do the client work,
Mm.
which I think is what a lot of us want, you should want that. It's great. If you want to
Right.
be a business owner and not just have a job,
Right.
then you need to escape from that thinking. Now, if you just want a job and you just want to do accounting, that's great too. But I wouldn't start your own firm if you're going to do that, because then it's like you're also a business owner and you're also an employee, and now you're working even more than you used to. So I would just go work for a better firm if that's what you want. But if
Mm,
you want to actually own a business and not have to like work in the business, then you need to build a firm where you don't have to be delivering the client work. And that's easy to say, but it's really hard to do.
right.
And I've done it twice now. I have done it with my online accounting firm where we did bookkeeping, bill pay, payroll, outsourced controllership. We were basically an outsourced accounting department for our clients. I did that there. By the end of it, by the time I sold it, I was doing zero client work.
Wow.
I didn't even know the clients that we were signing up because I had a sales guy signing them up, handing them off to my client services manager who was onboarding them and then handing them off to a bookkeeper. So we had clients coming in the door that were getting serviced by the firm who didn't know me and I didn't know them. And yet I made 20% profit on that business,
Not bad.
right? Which is totally doable.
Yeah.
Took a lot of years of setting that up
Yeah.
and hiring the right people. And that's the painful part, but you can get there. And now I've done it again with my media business. So Earmark is both an app, but it's also a production company because we produce CPE content for the app and we produce podcasts. And I don't do any of the editing anymore, any of the post production. I've hired people, I've taught them how to do it, I've standardized the process, and we can actually bring in a client for podcast production services
Mhm.
or webinar production services. And I never meet them, and they get serviced and they're happy and they pay. And I, as the business owner, profit. So if you want that for yourself, you have to do the hard work of documenting all of your processes and creating a standardized process for all the work you deliver. So in the bookkeeping business, that was I had to create a process for how do you reconcile the books every month? How do you pay the bills? How
Mhm.
do you run the payroll? And that's actually not as easy as it sounds. I think anybody who's tried to document a process knows that it takes a lot of time.
Well, and
And
there's nuance to it, right? I mean, one kind of set rule can be broken by, well, client X versus Y, they're going to have different things, and so you got to do it a little bit different in this way. And in
yeah,
terms of any standardized process, and certainly bookkeeping with different firms and things that they may need.
well, that's what the big firms do wrong, which is they have a customized process for every single client, which is fine if the client's willing to pay hourly for you to muck around and figure that out. But if you're serving small business clients, usually they can't afford that, right? At the midsize, well, I was at a top 25 firm. Our minimum fee for doing any bookkeeping was like $1,000 a month, and that was really stretching it.
Yeah.
So that it put 90% or more of the businesses out there out of reach for us. If you're going to go out on your own, you want to reach those other businesses that the mid-sized firms can't handle, right? So you have to have this standardized process.
Mm.
Luckily, I love technology and I love documenting processes. And so I would actually create these checklists and think of it like the checklist that the pilot goes through when they fly the plane every time, right? The pilot goes through a checklist, even though they've probably got it in their head, because if they miss one thing, everybody on the plane could die. So we have to think that way about our practices, even though usually there's no accounting emergencies, except in payroll. That's where they tend to be the most. You need to have this defined process where everybody goes through the checklist every time and stuff doesn't get missed that way.
Mm.
So you create the checklist and then you have to have like documentation for how the thing gets done. And that used to be a lot harder because you had to write it down. Now we've got tools like Scribe, we've got Loom. You can record yourself doing it and embed the video in your workflow software, in your task management software, so that somebody else can watch it and learn how to do it.
Mm.
That's the not so sexy secret. And it can take a few years. I probably spent a year.
Mm.
This I was able to do it faster with this business. I probably spent a year doing the work myself,
Mhm.
documenting how I did it, creating the standardized checklists, and then training somebody to take over for me with all the editing, for instance.
That would you recommend that
Yeah.
approach if I'm looking to start a new firm? Give yourself a year. Maybe don't blow the doors off with as many clients as you could possibly get. Just get a few, be sustainable. And
Yep.
then is that kind of the proposed plan that you would recommend?
Yeah, I would say you have to be less than 50%. working on client stuff because the other 50% is going to be documenting everything you're doing. It takes 2 times as long to do everything when you're documenting it or more. So yeah, you have to be able to take the time to document. And that's the problem that people have is they leave, they take on 100% of clients through their schedule, and then they never have any time to like document or hand anything off or be the business owner. They're just full all the time, right? So you got to get away from that. Maybe the solution is you don't leave your day job and you do this on the side for a while and you document like in your spare time, which is kind of what I did when I started my podcast. That was my Saturdays. So I set aside Saturday to both record and edit the show. And my goal was in one day to do the whole thing.
Right.
And put it out every week. And then I got faster at it so I could do it in half a day. I would record and then have breakfast and then edit, and then I'd be done by lunch. And then I documented it, and now I only record. I don't do anything else. And I do that on a Thursday instead of a Saturday now, right? So you got to be willing to, I mean, I don't think anybody has ever started a business and didn't work extra hours at the beginning. But the key is figuring out how not to work the extra hours your whole rest of your life.
And maybe like just trying, if we're talking about, because I think let's go in a second, Blake, and talk about existing firm owner that is drowning, because that's maybe a different problem to solve for. It's maybe same solution, but from a different angle. But
That's harder, honestly. If you already got a business where you're like maxed out,
yeah.
You might have to take a hit to your income, right? Get rid of some clients. But we usually do have a lot of clients that like you can go through your list and you can see, okay, they're not paying me much, but they're taking up a ton of my time. Fire those clients to make the time so you can actually improve your business. I think you got to do that.
And tell me if this is your experience as well, because being in our side of things, like doing marketing for folks, like I mean, it depends on who we're talking to, but not uncommon thing of I'm drowning. I don't have time.
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
trying to think through, you don't now, but again, first things first, the goal in your business is to enjoy the thing and to derive joy from it, right? Not just be a
Yeah.
slave to it. So that's
Well,
like thing number one for
there's
sure.
no reason to be drowning. It doesn't make any sense, right? Like the law of supply and demand says that if you raise your prices, demand will decrease. And so if demand is too high, it means your prices are too low. So you got to have courage to raise your prices.
We talk about it, but like people are nervous, right? It's like, what if I lose all my clients, Blake? What
Yeah,
if
it
I,
never happens. I've never. So I met one guy who lost the worst case scenario that I've ever heard is he like raised his prices really fast and lost half his clients and his revenue went down like 10 or 20%. But to me, that's actually better than the previous situation where he was drowning because now he has so much capacity to take on new work. If you do it really fast and you're rude about it, yes, people will get pissed and they will leave you just because you did a bad job of it.
yes,
But if you give people plenty of notice and you're nice and you explain why and how this is going to help you do more for them, right? If you do it in a empathetic way, the people who do it the right way, they actually struggle because they raise their prices and then nobody leaves.
right.
Right?
Which gives you some more capital to build and get a team with. But I think the implicit understanding of price raising is that you will supply and demand, you will lose some clients. And so maybe if you didn't lose any, maybe you didn't push high enough.
Yeah, exactly. And people are like doing these mediocre price increases like 5 to 10%.
Right.
That's inflation,
Right.
right now.
Yeah.
So it's not going to work. You have to be willing to do 20% or more price increases every year until you get down to the number of clients you really want. And we know that tax firms in particular are really underpriced. Like the average price for a 1040, if you look at surveys of tax return preparers, it's like a few $100s. And yet there's guys like Logan Graff, who's a fantastic YouTuber who has a tax practice that everyone should follow. His minimum is like over $1,000 now. And he's a young guy. It's not like he has like decades of experience. So if he can charge that much, I mean, he's super good looking, so maybe that helps. But if he can charge that much, then, I think everybody else can double their prices.
Let's talk about that for a second because Logan or others that charge those prices that you're like, how does that happen? To me, tell me what you think. A part of that is the authority positioning, the branding that like he gets to have because of the content he produces. the way he carries himself. And then therefore people are going to actually bang down his door and say, I trust you. I know that you're competent, you're on it, you're doing your stuff. But it starts with he has his content on YouTube that's getting picked up and it's done well. So
Yeah.
how much of a factor do you think that is with
I
his
think
price?
that certainly helps, right, to have that content out there. But I'm just guessing that probably a lot of his customers don't even know that he's on YouTube or care because his content's mostly for accountants. But you
Mm,
can tell from the way that he creates his content how thoughtful he is. I'm willing to bet that he is not just bringing you on as a client and then sending you an email saying, I need all your shit. And then
right.
you send it back to him and he gives you a return and never meets with you. I guarantee you that's not what he does. He's taking the time to get to know you, to meet with you, to spend some time with you, to make you feel valued. And people might only be willing to pay a few $100s for a 1040 if you're basically acting like TurboTax.
Right.
But if you are giving them a nice experience, they will happily pay two, three, four, or five times as much because most people in the income bracket where they're paying somebody else to do their return place a high premium on service. That's
Mm-hmm.
why five-star hotels are so much more expensive than four-star hotels. The
Mm-hmm.
only difference between a five-star hotel and a four-star hotel these
Mm-hmm.
days is service, honestly.
Right.
Like a JW Marriott is a really, really good four-star hotel. I go to those, and then I go to a five-star Andaz or something every now and then. And what's the difference? It's not the bed. It's not the amenities. It's not the food. It's the fact that they just have people that are handling every possible need you could have at the five-star resorts.
Mm.
And people pay a lot more for that. So,
Yep.
like, service has to be super important. You got to spend more time with your clients if you're going to charge more, which is great because then you don't have to have as many of them. And you
Right.
can do that. You can spend more time with them. You can actually have relationships with them and not just have them like hounding you for their return and being
Right.
jerks to you and stuff like that.
I
Yeah,
like,
it's not complicated.
but as you said, it's not where people drift. People don't drift into this. This is a fight, right? You got to swim upstream for a while, and at some point you've hit the tipping point. You're there,
Yeah.
but getting there. And let's talk about that for a second. Providing five-star service, which requires you to have time, requires you to have production behind you. You don't have to do all the work, but what are some of the things that if someone was like, okay, Blake, how do I like where do I start with that type of experience for my clients? Okay, I want them to pay more money. I want less of them.
Yeah.
But what do I need to do to start to angle towards providing that level of service, both relationally, the connection, the feeling that they would have? What's the steps, if there are any, you can articulate that you would start with if that's not the case today?
So we're just going to assume you've already created the capacity to have time to do this for your team and
Sure.
yourself. So let's assume that you've done that hard work. Then I would say it depends on what you do. But if you have tax only clients, you want to convert those into clients where you do the books for them too, because you might only charge $1,000 for the tax return, or maybe a few $1,000s for that business tax return, but you can charge hundreds of dollars a month for the bookkeeping.
Mm-hmm.
And if you bundle that as like an annual package, let's say you charge them $500 a month to do bookkeeping. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't have to be that much, a few $100. Let's say it's $200 a month. Super low, but let's say it's a really small rental property kind of business or something, real easy. So that's $2,400 a year.
Mm-hmm.
And then their tax return could easily be that much as well. So now you've got a client paying you $4,800 a year, round up to 5,000. That's one client you only have to have one relationship with, as opposed to 10 clients paying you $500 for tax returns, individual 1040s or something.
Mm-hmm.
So what can you do with all that extra time is you can say, okay, I'm doing your books, so I'm going to meet with you now on, say, a quarterly basis, and I will give you your financials. I will answer your questions. We'll do a little tax planning. We're not just going to do it at the end of the year. And you spread out the work now. So now your
Mm-hmm.
team has what they need earlier. They're not doing it all during tax season. You're doing the books, so the information you're getting is higher quality. That's one of the big benefits of doing the books and the tax together is that you actually know that the data you're getting is good.
That helps.
Like garbage in, garbage out, right? So do the books.
Right.
That's basically the reason my firm got bought. I wasn't doing taxes. A CPA came along and met me and was like, "Oh, this guy's figured out how to do bookkeeping for cheap." I'm going to buy his practice and I'm going to integrate it into mine. And we're going to offer tax to all of the bookkeeping clients. We're going to offer bookkeeping to all the tax clients. And it increased the realization on the tax work by many, many times because they had what they needed. And that firm got bought by Aprio.
Wow.
So like my little practice that I started is now the nucleus of the client accounting services practice at a top 25 firm, right? It's not that complicated. I don't understand why like people just do the tax and don't want to do the books. It's really short-sighted. I think it's
Mm,
because they see the bookkeeping as like low value margin, low margin work.
right.
But that's only if you think about it on an hourly basis, right? If
Mm,
you combine it into a holistic package, you're talking thousands of dollars a year. Yeah.
certainty, and then some, obviously things flow more smoothly, and you're not maybe as much up against the clock at the end of the
Yeah.
year, right?
So let's just put some like numbers on it. Let's say I'm a solo CPA and I want to make $500,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
I could have 100 clients paying me $5,000 a year
Mm-hmm.
and I could do their books and I could do their taxes. Now, would I do all of that myself? No, I want to hire somebody to do the bookkeeping. I could probably get somebody offshore in the Philippines. I could get a CPA for $15 an hour to do the bookkeeping work for those 100 clients. Because if we're only doing it, say, on a quarterly basis, not like necessarily on a monthly basis, you could spread out the 100 over
Right.
90 days in a quarter, right? They could just do one or two a day,
Mm-hmm.
essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And you could have a business where you're making $500,000 a year and you're paying somebody $36,000 a year to help you with it. You could hire, and actually, I know a CPA who's doing that, and he's got like a team of, I don't know, 10 in the Philippines.
Wow.
So like you could hire quite a few people. So like the capacity is not an issue. Hire like half a dozen, and you yourself are making a few $100,000 a year now.
Let's talk about that component, because to build the system that you're describing obviously does require, we've talked about systems, kind of SOPs.
Yeah.
Okay. I know how everything works, and I'm not necessarily trying to serve everyone custom. I've got my lane, and I know what I do, and I know how to do it. Great. And then I've got the goal that I don't want all my time sucked into this thing. I want to pass that documentation to someone, and I want to provide this high level experience for my clients so that it is true. Like, people want that, right? They will pay for attention. They will pay for intentionality and for that higher level service. But the thing that makes it all run, this thing's included, are the people that then you bring on. And I think that's another place. Maybe
Yeah.
someone's afraid of raising my prices. I'm afraid of bundling my services. I'm afraid of adding bookkeeping to my tax work. Okay, fine. Let's assume that's not the case. Maybe your thing is, okay, Blake, you make it sound easy. Where do those people come from and how do I manage them? Because now I'm not
Yeah.
just a CPA or a bookkeeper that's got technical skill. Now I am a business owner, and being a business owner is, you can outsource this too, you can groom this too, but I'm leading and managing people.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's
But
talk about that.
if you have the processes and the checklists, you can manage the work remotely and you can hire people abroad and they can do the work and you can review it. You build that review into your process. And you could have one person reviewing another person's work, just like in, I mean, this is something that bigger firms do really well, almost too well, is they have lots of layers of review, right?
Right.
You know how to do that if you've worked at a bigger firm before. You know the review process. You just got to build it into your workflow software. For instance, we use a tool called Process Street at my latest company at Earmark. And
Mm,
Process Street lets me have approval tasks, and the workflow cannot continue until somebody has signed off on whatever it is that was created. So I do that review to start, and then I eventually hand it off. So, like with all of our CPE course creation, I don't have anything to do with it anymore. I have writers in the Philippines that write the courses. I pay them a flat rate per course. I've started hiring a few of them full time though, because they like that better. And it's still very affordable. And then I have a reviewer whose job is just to review the work of the writers. And they're all in the Philippines. And I'll set it up in workflows, and I have no idea when they work, how many hours they work. I don't care because all I know is that they are delivering the 20 courses per week that we need to put on our platform, right? And I don't feel a lot of cost pressure because the difference in cost of living there is so much that again, it's like 10 to $20 an hour for labor.
really
Really
good.
high, really educated people. And they're happy because I don't track their time. I don't make them work crazy hours. My guess is they're working 6 hours a day. So they have great quality of life. Everyone's happy. That's
Yeah.
really hard for firm owners to
it's scary if they, one, just don't have a vision for it first. Because it's like, oh my God, I've never thought about either offshoring general or even
I mean,
hiring domestically, which is more expensive
you
but hard.
you can basically offshore in the US too, right? There's lots of like Rust Belt cities where there's no work, but they do have internet. And one of
Mhm.
my key employees is it's a little more expensive than in the Philippines, maybe twice as much. She's in Ohio. In her town, I think the average income is like under $40,000 a year. So you can find those people. There are smart people. They may not have college educations, and that's what's held them back from other opportunities. But if you're willing to train them, like she's super smart and really like talented and was doing transcription work before. That's how we found each other.
Mm.
Somebody who can like transcribe really fast, generally good with computers. So you just got to be creative. It's just, I feel like a lot of accountants, they don't think creatively enough, which is like I understand why. But if you want to be successful and you don't want everything handed to you like nothing's going to get handed to you on a silver spoon, right? If you just want to follow the traditional path, you can go work at an accounting firm. They'll work you to the bone. And yeah, you can make $500,000 or more as a partner, but you're not going to have a life.
There is,
If you want something out of that path, you got to think a little different. I could have done that, right? Like I was on that path. I was a manager at a top 25 firm. I was commuting an hour each way in LA, and I had a view of the ocean. I could never go to the ocean because like never had time to go. I watched the sunset. I drive home in the dark. I could have been making a lot of money, but it would have gone down the hole in LA to pay for my mortgage and my kids' private school education. I said, you know what? Screw that. COVID helped, right?
right.
We moved and I couldn't be happier. And I'm so glad. Anyone listening to this that's living that life where you're just grinding away, you don't have to do that. I know it's hard to move and it's hard to uproot your family and stuff, but you can spend more time with them. You can be like, I can be a present father for my son
Mm.
in the way that my dad wasn't. And I take care of my physical health and I'm going to live longer as a result. And I'm happy. And accountants can be happy. That's the crazy thing about accounting. I got into accounting
That's good.
because of the flexibility. And
Right.
yet most people don't have it. But it's a great job because you can do it from almost anywhere.
That should be the title of this podcast. Accountants can be happy. I think that's
Accountants
perfect.
can be happy
Yeah.
if we
Yeah.
let ourselves.
Hey, that's your book right there, Blake. I don't know if you've got that already in the works, but
I
that's a
am
good.
writing a book right now. The title's something else, but maybe I'll have to change it. Yes.
Yeah. I mean
But
that.
yeah, accounting is a wonderful career. But like for some reason, man, we just make it bad. And it's like, I don't get it. I don't. And that's, I guess I've always been an outsider, right? Coming in as a musician. That's why, like, when I started my firm, I did it with fixed fees, remote work, like all this stuff that nobody did. I
Mm.
said, why not? It works for all these other companies. Let's try it.
And certainly there are some creative ideas that don't land. And there are also like there's nothing new under the sun. Like the things that might work, they might not be in our industry, but you can find them. Like how to
Yeah.
build a healthy startup, how to build a business that again, you're the business owner and not in it all the time. There's a lot of content out there, but you're right that our space maybe at times lacks the creativity of the engineering, the lifestyle, engineering the business that you're going to actually want to be in for 10 plus years and not try and escape.
I'll say this, it was harder when I started because there wasn't a playbook. But now there are guys who have started firms like me who have become coaches
Right.
who are, they've written playbooks. So if you don't know how to do this, you can go join two communities. There's Ryan Lazanis
Right.
and there's Jason Stats.
Mm-hmm.
And they're different flavors doing the same thing, right? Future Firm is Ryan Lazanis.
Mm-hmm.
He had a firm just like mine. And Jason Stats, who had a tax firm
Mm-hmm.
that he modernized with tech. So, and that's Realize. So if you're a tax person, like you can go to that, follow him. If you're a client accounting services, bookkeeping kind of person, Jason or Ryan Lazanis. I prefer the bookkeeping, client accounting services stuff because I just think it's better lifestyle. But like both work. There's lots of groups now. So it's not exactly as like defined as perhaps like the other path that's been around for 100 years. But yeah, it's
Well, it's catching on, right? I think the feedback loop to those guys is they're getting popular because people are maybe desperately curious now for I need stuff to change. And that's those that are still in our space that haven't already pushed eject because they're just burnt out and crispy. They're like, I need to innovate. I need to change. I need to modernize. And so it is, you're right. We actually had Ryan on. He was the guest two times, I think two guests before you. And similar, yeah, similar conversation. It is awesome that there are people getting that level of notoriety because it's desperately needed to have
Yeah.
the here's the guy on the hill, follow me, let's go. Like I've done it. And that's right. It wasn't that long ago that there wasn't someone. Now, again, other business spaces, for sure, you could find those people that would help you find the principles. But now in this space, there truly are. And I think, Blake, you're in that crowd too of with what you're doing with Earmark, the innovation you're bringing in your own story. Might be a slightly nuanced approach compared to those two. There's a
Yeah.
growing pantheon of people that are like waving the flag, like, come this way, guys, let's go.
The difference between me and those guys is I'm like a terrible coach. Like, I think that's part of the reason I didn't stay in music is because the best, like most stable career in music is teaching.
Hmm.
And if I don't like teaching one on one,
Gotcha.
like giving lessons. I'm impatient. So I like
Yeah.
my podcast because I can like just spew ideas like this. We can talk one on one and people can like listen to it. If they like it, great. If they don't like it, whatever.
Right.
But I'm not like sitting there trying to help you, Christian, build
Right.
your own practice and like going through it with you. I just, I did it once myself. I can't go through it again with everybody else.
Right. And that's
So,
there's different types of coaches, right? There's the guys in the weeds that are going to give you the specs on A to
yeah,
Z, everything you need. And then there's the vision, right? Here's the vision. And I think we need both. I think we need people that are going to give you the
well,
playbook. And then those are going to like at least tell you, hey, here's the path you can go. And
yeah.
I
And
think it's needed.
you just got to also like when you go on this journey, starting your own business, it's going to be hard and you're going to feel like you're building the boat while you're like sailing
Yeah.
and there's going to be leaks everywhere and you're going to feel like you're failing. But like, you just have to remember that everybody who did it also felt that way the whole time.
Oh,
There's gaps in everybody's business, and what you see from the outside is not what is going on inside.
nope.
And the key is just to keep swimming,
Right.
right? Well, hopefully you're not swimming. Hopefully the boat is still afloat.
Hope the boat's doing boat like things for you, right? Because
Exactly. And you're bailing it out faster than the water's coming in.
and
And
I
you're
think that there's also it's good as we turn the corner here towards the end. It is also it is, as you said earlier, it is okay if the vision for your life is actually you try this and you realize, I don't, I just don't want to. I do just want to plug in and do my thing. And maybe it is
yeah.
just a better firm. That's okay. That's not a bad thing. But
Eh,
maybe there's
yeah,
more beyond
totally.
that that just
A-
don't know.
And that's the thing that I think happens to a lot of folks who want to start their own firm is they go off and they're like, oh, I realize I don't actually like doing sales that much. And you have to like, you don't have to like it, but you have to be willing to do it every day for years, taking those initial calls with prospects and learning about them and trying to solve their problems. And like 80% of the people you talk to or more are not going to be a good fit for your firm. And that feels like you're failing constantly because you're not signing up these people, right? That's really hard, I think, for a lot of people who've been in a client service role. And if you don't like that, you can try it, right? And if you don't like it, I would say the best thing for you then is to go find somebody who does and work in their company
Yes.
and work in an operational role or work in a client services role and just find a company that thinks like you want. Yeah.
Yes.
And there are lots more firms now out there like that.
Fighting for entrepreneurialism or just that idea of pushing whatever the ceiling might be for you. Again, maybe it doesn't land that you at the end of it have your own firm and you're building and scaling in the ways that we've discussed today. But the things that you'll learn in that process will give you different skills and give you a different vision that then you can go and bring to another firm and maybe be the key guy that helps execute. Maybe that's again like praise God that there's
Yeah.
different people with different desires and skill sets. That's a good thing. So being the business owner entrepreneur is not necessarily like it's a great place to be if you want to, but like Blake said, golly, as you well know, if you don't already, it's a confusing, wild, interesting journey with
Yeah.
lots of ups and downs.
Well,
And
that's a roller coaster ride for sure. Absolutely.
we have the phrase similar to yours, Blake, around here that, at times when we're launching a new service or we're trying to figure out how to innovate, my God, digital marketing changes all the time. Building the airplane in the air.
Yeah.
And we know enough to get going, and then you throw it out there and you just keep putting the wings on. And that's just life. That is, and that level of risk tolerance, right? That's a thing that you have to, some of you just need to be like, it will be okay. Shut down the noise in your mind and just
Oh,
go,
on that note, I have a trick for everyone.
please.
I learned this in the software world, tech world. Whenever you're launching a new product, just call it a beta.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you have people paying for it, call it a beta and say, look, this is a new thing. It's not finished yet. And it really helps just
Mm-hmm.
to be honest with people. And I've got services like that. Like we are now writing LinkedIn posts and blog articles based on the podcast episodes we produce for people. And I say it's a beta. I say, we're going to do it for you for free. And we're going to do as much of it as we can. And you just give me your feedback, right? And that way, like, there's very low expectations. So I
Love it.
can succeed no matter what.
I think that's perfect.
So
I think that's perfect.
call it a beta.
Okay.
Call
I'm
your
on.
whole firm a beta for the first year.
Everything I'm doing is a beta test. This is perfect.
Gmail was in beta for years, if
Oh,
everyone remembers that.
oh yeah, totally. No, this
Yeah.
has been great, Blake. I think there's definitely maybe a part two. We didn't talk as much about AI. I think that could be a fun topic given your,
Oh,
innovation
well,
within.
you're all about digital marketing, and like we have been using AI to generate so much more content.
Right.
And the key, of course, is like using it in a way that feels real and authentic and is your voice.
Yes.
So
The
eager to
thing
talk about that with you.
with content around AI is expertise, authority, and trustworthiness. Those are the three things that Google is evaluating with content now. There's the tests where human written content gets flagged as AI and then AI content gets flagged as human. It's not perfect, but the idea that you can generate more content now with just simple editing is true. You
Yeah.
totally can, but what people respond to still is certainly authority, expertise, and trust. And so that's still, I mean, as we write blogs and emails and content for our people, that's the balance of always. And to be honest, like we use some AI tools, but because of that, we still primarily use human writing. And some of
Yeah.
that's like voice and style that's hard to replicate with AI tools. Like you can build some of that back in. That's I'm in the weeds now, but I think let's do that again. Let's talk AI and just riff. And I want to hear more about your again media firm and former accounting CPA firm you ran and just where you see that going. So that's one question we missed, but I think that deserves its own time. So I'll follow up and guys, we'll bring Blake back. So I hope you guys got a lot of value out of this. I had a lot of fun. And Blake, I can't forget, we want to send people to earmark.app. Yes, that's where they're going.
Yes. Earmark that app. You can use it on the web for free, sign up for free. And then also we have an iOS app and the Android app. So you can download the mobile app.
Get your CPE by listening to podcasts, answering simple surveys at the end. Great innovation, a great way while we're still in this place where you've got to keep getting that credit for the time being, right? That's a much easier way to do so and sprinkle in some other forms of, yeah, just getting that credit that you all need. So thanks for innovating that, Blake. That's a great service to our space. Thanks for the conversation today. And again, you guys can look for Blake to come back sometime in the future and we'll talk AI or whatever else is happening at the time and we'll go from there. So thanks again, Blake. Really
Yeah,
appreciate it.
my pleasure, Christian.
Okay, see you guys soon.